Here's just to give you the difference, the effects of cortisol, for example. It causes us to make bad decisions. It doesn't help us with our attention span. It's hard to pay attention when you're full of cortisol. You can't solve problems. You have few ideas. You're pessimistic, nervous, stressed, unhappy. Now, a lot of people spend a good portion of their life like that. The important thing to realise this morning is that cortisol is there when we feel bad, and if we feel bad, more of it will be there, and it affects our performance. That's the big thing. It affects our performance. Whereas dopamine, it's very easy to pay attention. Our mind is clear. We make good decisions. We solve problems. We have ideas. We're optimistic, confident, relaxed and happy. So giving ourselves a hit of dopamine, and I'm not talking about up the nose, giving ourselves a hit of dopamine is a very smart idea, and it's very easy to do. That's the first neuroscience principle, neurotransmitters. The importance of dopamine and the understanding of cortisol and what it can do to us, and we need to keep away from it if we can. The second science type bit I'll give you. At the front of our brain is an area called the prefrontal cortex. It's our decision-making area. It's where we plan, where we reason, where we control. It's basically where our conscious mind comes from. It has a huge job to do, and it's weak as a kitten. It really is. Its capacity is minimal, very, very small. When we get our brain, we don't get an owner's manual. At least I didn't. If I did, my mother left it at the hospital. Right? We have to learn by experience. No one really tells us much about our brain. If we had a manual for our prefrontal cortex, there are some very important things we'd learn. One would be, please note, your prefrontal cortex is a very limited resource. Using it for conscious thought takes a lot of energy. Energy being glucose and oxygen, which is what the brain works on. We tire ourselves very quickly when we're overusing our prefrontal cortex. Your brain is, by the way, your brain is 2% of your body weight, but uses 20% of your oxygen, 25% of your glucose. And the prefrontal cortex chews through this stuff like a 8-cylinder engine. That's why we get tired, why we have trouble focusing. So the third thing about in a user guide would be that the effectiveness of our prefrontal cortex diminishes the more we use it. Now, don't forget, I'm going to give you the practical application of all this in a minute. Two things there. It's not the workload that brings you down, it's the way you carry it. Two things. Neurotransmitters, the fact that we love to be full of dopamine as much as we can and avoid cortisol, and the fact that our prefrontal cortex, our conscious mind, is extremely limited. Here's a couple of people who wrote some famous books, and they were spot on, but they didn't really understand the science behind why they were right. Norman Vincent Peale wrote The Power of Positive Thinking in the late 30s or the early 40s, about 13 million copies sold so far. What he didn't realise was he was saying to people, keep yourself dopamine rich, think positive, keep your brain dopamine rich, because then you'll be successful, you'll make good decisions. The other book has also sold 13 million copies, The 1 Minute Manager. I think it came out about the 70s. One of the chapters that's very popular in that is a chapter called The 1 Minute Praising, where it talks about how we should look for opportunities to praise people when they've done something good. What's that saying? Catch people doing something right. Okay? What they didn't know, but what we now know, is what they were actually saying is, go and give your staff a dopamine hit as often as you possibly can. That's what they were saying. So they were correct, but they didn't sort of really know why. And here's another one. I'm sure some of you have heard this before from me or one of our team. Mark Twain. We all know Mark Twain. Prolific American writer. Had a funny way with words. He could get a good idea across in an amusing way. Very famous raconteur, etc. He told people that the best habit to develop, the first thing you should do each morning is to eat a live frog. And bearing in mind he was speaking to an American audience, right? Americans don't eat frogs. And the idea of eating frogs for an American is abhorrent. Now, of course, in Asia, we sometimes eat frogs. And en France, Stephanie? Frog's legs? Occasionally? Yeah. But he's talking to an American audience. So he was saying to them, the first thing you should do each morning is do something you really don't want to do. And what he meant was, the frog is that thing you really don't want to do. That thing you are likely to put off till tomorrow because you don't want to call that person. You know it's going to be uncomfortable. You don't want to finish that report. You don't want to have that meeting. That's your frog. And Mark Twain was saying, if you do that thing first thing in the morning, it's going to get it off your mind and you're going to get a lift. You're going to feel good. And we know that's what happens. When we do the thing that we're dreading, that's what happens. We feel great. What's actually going on there? While you're lying in bed the night before thinking about this awful meeting, you are filling yourself with cortisol, stressing and worrying about it. When you do it, when you get that out of the way, you're giving yourself a dopamine hit and you feel terrific. So the quicker you can get from dwelling on it and thinking about it and worrying about it to having it done, over and done with and feeling good. You know, Mark Twain was right. He didn't really understand neurotransmitters at all, but he knew what human life was all about and how people react. So there's a few little basic things. Now, here's where we're going to get practical, John. Time management. Okay. Time management. We're just going to show how we can apply those little things, those few things we've covered to time management. Now, here's where we're going to get practical, John. Time management. Okay. Time management. We're just going to show how we can apply those little things, those few things we've covered to time management. I googled this recently. I googled Amazon for time management and I found 12,732 books. People are out there buying personal development books by the truckload in every area. I think if they were getting good results from the way they're doing their time management, they might not be selling quite so many books, maybe. I'm going to take you through 4 steps of time management that are going to relate back to prefrontal cortex and transmitters. Okay. If I said hands up if you have a to-do list, I won't do that because I know most of you would say yes and some wouldn't and they might feel a bit uncomfortable about it. Let me do it a different way. Why do you have a to-do list? And I appreciate that people will be using electronic devices rather than paper or whatever. Why do you have a to-do list? Is it because you don't want to forget anything? Is that why you write it down? You don't want to forget things? Would you agree with that? Please. Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Great, okay. What about if I said this to you? Understanding how your prefrontal cortex works and how it's limited, the best reason to have a to-do list is so you can forget things. Right? Because if you start your day with 15 things in your head that you're trying to keep at the forefront in your prefrontal cortex, you have a blowout. You can't do that. It can only really focus on one thing at a time. But when you've written them down, you no longer have to try and think about them because you know when I've done that one, I come and look at that one, etc. So the real reason for having a to-do list is not that we don't want to forget, it's that we want to be able to forget, in a way. We want to be able to massage our prefrontal cortex and let it work as it will work best. Okay? So trying to keep track of multiple tasks using your prefrontal cortex really wears it out. So writing it down enables you to not do that. Very simple, I know, but there's a different way of looking at it. Second thing, add in your frogs. Up the top of the list. And you know, to-do list is, we're talking a bit about the how, why and when of to-do lists. When. To-do list for tomorrow will build up today and might have even started to build up yesterday, as you know. And then maybe in the evening you'll put a few more things in there. And maybe first thing in the morning you might want to put 1 or 2 more things in there. But your frogs should be prominent. What are tomorrow's frogs? Let me give you a little hint that's not in the script. One of the great things you can do in the case of something you don't want to, that you know you have to do tomorrow and you really don't want to do it, is while you're lying in bed, instead of worrying about it, imagine that you've done it. Imagine that it's gone successfully. See it all in your mind's eye. And what you're effectively doing there is giving yourself a dopamine hit that's associated with this task you don't want to do. Because bear in mind, you're then working with your subconscious mind, which doesn't know what's true and what's not true. It can't tell from your imagination to the real things. So imagine at least that you've gone through that frog successfully and you'll give yourself a good feeling. and that will also line you up to get the thing done tomorrow. Eating frogs takes you from a very cortisol-rich, stressed brain state to a dopamine-rich neurological wash. And there's the change. I want to be like the guy at the bottom. Okay, the next thing, and this has been recommended by many people, and that is decide which tasks are urgent and important, or what combination. Are they urgent and important? Are they urgent and not important? Etc. You know, Stephen Covey did this. You'll find it in most of the books. I would say, yeah, it's a good thing to do, but it's really only a first step to something much, much more important. Much more important. But certainly, it's a good idea to have somewhere on your to-do list where you can assess the urgency of your tasks. It is the first step to the most important thing, which is prioritising. How many people go into the office in the morning and the first thing they do is they turn on their computer and they start to scan their email? There are a few honest people in the room. I'll bet most of us do. I bet most of us do that. That immediately puts your prefrontal cortex into overload and slows you down, and you're looking for your first cup of coffee to try and get yourself going. The first 5 or 10 minutes each morning should be spent with your to-do list prioritising. Okay, you already know what things are going to happen today. You know about meetings, so you're not going to allocate some time in the middle of a meeting to do one of these important things. But prioritising. You see, again, your prefrontal cortex is struggling with all this information. If you prioritise, when you do prioritise, you have to use your conscious mind, right? It's a very energy-sapping process. Doing it and getting it out of the way first thing in the morning is very useful.